Foundation of Canada. Today we have Dr. Todd Cunningham joining us from Toronto. With his engaging presentation style, weaving together research, compelling stories, and humor, Dr. Cunningham has empowered thousands of educators to optimize the use of assistive technology in their classrooms. Dr. Cunningham is a psychologist currently teaching at University of Toronto and providing academic intervention services. He completed his postdoctoral fellowship in the psychology department at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto and obtained his PhD in clinical psychology at the University of Toronto. His innovative research investigates the integration of assistive technology and learning strategies for children with learning difficulties due to a variety of reasons. A sought-after public speaker and consultant, Dr. Cunningham has shared his expertise with parents, students, educators, school boards, and other professionals across Canada. In addition to hundreds of workshops, Dr. Cunningham has guest lectured at universities, given keynote addresses, presented at educational and research conferences, and appeared on CBC several times. Dr. Cunningham was recently awarded a Bell Let's Talk mental health grant to provide academic intervention support to Northern Ontario communicates through telepsychology. Today, Dr. Cunningham's presentation is entitled Assistive Technology for Individuals with Cognitive Challenges. Welcome you, Dr. Cunningham, and I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you to all those who are tuning in. Today, I really want to talk about individuals who are having cognitive challenges due to the effects of either their disease or the treatment related to their disease. When I was working at Sick Kids, I was often amazed at many of the students I work with, how before they were diagnosed, life was going along pretty normally for them in terms of their schooling, their social skills and that. But after getting sick, after going through treatment to be able to cure the disease, then they started to encounter some real difficulties. And a lot of these began to develop in the areas of academics. School began to become harder and harder. And what used to be a normal trajectory of development for them now became something that was becoming frustrating. And so what I want to talk about today is kind of being able to change this level of frustration. Often in schools, what we see is as the tasks that we give students, if the challenge of that task is too high, it causes a lot of frustration or an anxiety in students. And as that frustration and anxiety increases, students begin to withdraw more and more from the daily activities or that are being presented to them. So for example, one of the students I was working with before he was sick, he was doing quite well in math, but about 5 years after his recovery, math was an area that was becoming more and more challenging due to working memory deficits that were emerging and due to processing speed weaknesses that had emerged. And as math became more and more difficult in school, he began to not want to attend school. In fact, school became a source of anxiety for him. Parents would talk about in the morning having to kind of drag him out of bed to get him to go to school. How when he was at school, in class, especially math class, he acted up a lot, kind of talking to other kids or moving around the room, behaviors that weren't there before. And when we sat down with him and kind of looked at what was difficult with math, the main thing that was challenging him was just remembering how to do the steps, trying to get through those individual steps. And so what happened is the challenge of math was increasing so much that he was really creating a lot of anxiety, and so therefore he was disengaging. Now teachers often, one of the first things they do when they kind of trying to deal with challenges is often they will kind of what we call water down. So instead of really kind of continuing to challenge the individual, they begin to give them kind of more basic math problems, easier math problems, to the point where the students begin to get bored because they don't see the purpose of what they're doing. You know, one can only add 1 + 1 = 2 so many times before they decide math really has no bearing on my life. And so often what happens is we water it down. And also what we know is when we keep the work boring for the individuals, that it also begins to create frustration. So the idea is then, how can we provide supports to students to try and help them to continue on a developmental trajectory that allows them to be able to do work that is closer to those that their students are doing? Or beyond school, how can we ensure that we can create individuals that are more independent And often what we're always talking about is the performance gap. The idea that the individuals that we work with, due to, again, the effects of the disease or treatment, that over time their developmental trajectory changes and that a gap between emerges from where typical individuals are and where our clients are. And so how do we go in and start filling in that gap? How do we can alleviate some of that distance so that our clients are being able to work at a higher level or more independent? And there's a lot of things we can do, a lot of things that we can do out there, especially in the area of education, from universal design to learning to response to intervention and differentiation. But these things really require the teacher. These are very teacher specific. On the other hand, there are other things that teachers can do as well as parents and other care providers that can help actually target the underlying conditions. And to do that, we can either do remediation, which is trying to strengthen that underlying skill. So for individuals who's having difficulties with math, it's practicing math and going through specific math programs such as Jump Math to actually strengthen that underlying skill. Or we can do other things called compensatory, which is kind of the circumventing, working around that area of challenge so that the student, again, can become more independent without that level, that area of challenging really dictating their performance. And one of these areas of compensatory is the area of assistive technology. Now, assistive technology, by definition, can really be anything. It's any technology, modified, customized, that can assist or increase or maintain the functioning of a person with a disability. Now, when I think of assistive technology, I often think of the wheelchair. You know, before we had the wheelchair developed, before we developed the wheelchair, a person who was unable to use their legs really had two means to get from point A to point B. They could either pull themselves across the ground using their arms, a very effortful task, or they could be reliant on someone else. Someone could pick them up and move them from point A to point B to allow them to have that kind of functioning, of movement. Well, once we developed the wheelchair, once we had this assistive technology aid, a person then could more easily move from point A to point B effectively, as well as independently. And so for individuals who have cognitive difficulties, that's what we want to do with the technology. We want these individuals to be able to do more of the tasks that other individuals are able to do more independently without as much effort. And that's why we really kind of call this technology as kind of the cognitive prosthesis. Technology replace or circumvent skills that is absent or impaired in these individuals. So how do we find the right technology? Because that's often what I hear when I'm meeting with parents or teachers. How do we find the right technology to be able to help our individuals who either have reading, writing, math, organization difficulties? How do we begin to find the right technology to be able to support them? And over the years, what I've been developing is what's called the Assistive Technology Selection Protocol. It's a protocol that allows a person to move through the process of identifying, collecting the relevant information to help inform the decision around what's the right technology tool to work with an individual, and then go through the process of actually identifying what that tool is. So first we kind of identify the relevant information to help us make the decision, and then we go through a process of being able to select that tool. And right now you can find kind of version number 1 of this protocol on the website www.learndifferent.org. As of the end of August this year, there's going to be a new version of it, which is all very interactive and will more easily move you through. I'll put the caveat out right there that this is a poor website design at this moment, but by the end of August we'll have a very nice up-to-date website that will move you through the process. So the process really starts out from what we call the SETT framework. We have to know the student, we have to know the environment that student's working in, we have to know the task that's getting in the way, and then we can start to think of what tool is going to help that student. So when we think of the student, really the big questions are how does the student learn? what are the cognitive impairments that they're experiencing, as well as what are the academic skills that are not developing at the same rate that is causing that frustration or causing that individual to be dependent on others. And so in the protocol, what you'll see is this kind of overwhelming map initially, which is kind of the learning profile. What I've done here is I've taken and broken down all the kind of specific cognitive tasks as well as academic skill tasks that are required to be able to move yourself through school, as well as needed kind of in later parts of life. So often when we say a person's having difficulties with reading, that doesn't tell us enough. What we have to do is we have to break down what specifically is the impairment in reading. Is it that the fact that they can't decode or recognize individual words? Or is it that they don't understand what they're reading? Same thing with math. With math, is it the fact that they are unable to organize their work? Is it the fact that they don't understand how to do basic math computation? Is it a speed issue? Or is it their ability to apply their knowledge to solve problems? So we really have to break down and identify what is the specific areas of challenge for the student, so that that helps us inform where those areas of challenges are lying, as well as where the student's strengths are. What are the things that we can use to be able to help ourselves out? The next thing is we have to understand the environment. What is the environment that the student's working within? One of the individuals I worked with at Sick Kids, after working with the school, once they had identified that reading and math were key areas of challenge for the student, it was decided that the school would purchase some technology to be able to support the student. And in Ontario, we have something called the Special Equipment Amount Grant, the SEA grant, which is an assistive technology grant that schools can apply for to get technology for individual schools, or for individual students to use in the classroom. And so after spending about a year trying to get this technology grant, we finally were awarded it, and the school purchased about $6,000 worth of hardware and software for this individual. Now he was in grade 7, and my recommendation was we needed to get this individual a laptop because, well, he needed a laptop to move around. However, the school was concerned about this, and so what the concern of the school was they were worried about the safety of the laptop. They were worried that the student would drop the laptop or the laptop would get stolen. So they decided not to buy him a laptop. Instead, what they bought him was a desktop computer. Well, that first day when that desktop computer arrived and they set it up in his classroom, they realized they had made a fundamental mistake. They realized that this desktop computer was only going to be able to stay in one room, and the student was on rotary. He did go to multiple classrooms, and because it was a desktop, he couldn't take his technology from class to class to class. So the solution was to buy him a table with wheels on it, and it was the expectation that he would push his desktop computer through the hallways from class to class to class. Well, his balance was a little bit off, and I also don't know any student who's going to commit social suicide by pushing their laptop or their desktop computer down the hallways from class to class to class so that they can be able to use it. So suddenly this amazing technology, this $6,000 investment in technology for the student, was only used for a third of the day while he was in his homeroom class. So when we're thinking about the technology, we really have to think of what are the environments the student is going, or the individual is going to be in as they go from place to place to place. This really impacts adults. When adults are at home, or they're at volunteer locations, or even in workplace settings, they're in different environments, and they need to have that technology with them so that they can use the technology to work around those areas of challenges in no matter what environment that they're going to. So having to have an inventory of the environments that the individual is in and going to need the technology is really, really important. The next thing then is to really break down what is the specific task that is impairing the individual from doing what we'd expect them to do. So going back to the person who's unable to use your legs, if you're unable to use your legs to get from point A to point B, and traveling is the task that's getting in the way, then that's what we need to work at. We need to kind of bring in a technology to help them be able to have movement go from point A to point B. For the student who's unable to do math calculation, who's having a difficulty remembering the multiplication tables or remembering the rules of bed math, and so therefore math is becoming an area of challenge, then again it is that skill, it is that task that is preventing them from learning other areas of mathematics because they're so focused on having to think about what is recalling their multiplication tables. For an individual who has organization difficulties, often what we find with these individuals is they forget to do assignments, or they forget to do the last night's homework. Or if you give them an important piece of paper to take home from the teacher to the parent, that piece of paper gets lost somewhere along the way. So just general organization often becomes an impairment from them to be able to do lots of other tasks in their lives. So we have to understand what is the specific task that's getting in the way. And then once we understand the student, we understand the environments that they're working in, and we understand what are the specific tasks that are preventing them from being able to be more independent, that's when we can start to look at what is the right tool that's going to help a student. Now, when I talk about tools or assistive technology tools, I'm not talking about programs, and this often gets misunderstood in the community. Often what I find with students who have cognitive impairments, especially in the areas of math or reading or writing, often what I see as the recommendations are Kurzweil 3000 or Inspiration or Dragon Naturally Speaking. And then these are programs, these are assistive technology programs, but these programs are made up of a lot of tools. For example, Microsoft Word is a program, and it's probably a program most of you have used. But Microsoft Word as a program is made up of a lot of tools. It has the general tool that it's meant for is a text editing tool, being able to put text into a field. But you have editing tools, you have formatting tools, you have a spell check tool, you have a zooming tool, you have printing tools. You have a lot of different tools or functions built into this one program. The same thing with our assistive technology programs. Our programs have a lot of different tools within them. And what we need to do is identify what is the right tool in these programs to be able to support a student. Too often we recommend programs for students, and because those programs have so many different tools in them, the student doesn't actually know what is the right fit. What are the right tools or functions in that software that are going to be able to aid them to be able to do the task that is challenging for them. So for example, Kurzweil 3000, which is probably one of the most popular reading assistive technology programs in Ontario, has almost 180 different tools built into it. It has its core tool, which is called text-to-speech, the ability to translate text into audible speech. It also has a scanning tool in it. It has study tools in it. It has document tools in it, such as saving. Has a dictionary, has word prediction, it has spell check. It has a lot of different tools built into this program. But for a student who's having difficulties with the fact of just being able to read individual words, they don't need to know a lot of these other tools. They just need to know how to use really the text-to-speech tool, maybe the scanning tool. They don't need to learn all these other tools. And what happens often in training with students around these programs is when we recommend a program to the student and we bring a trainer in, that trainer will sit down and teach that student those 180 different tools built into this program. So when the student goes back to their classroom or the student goes home to do their work that night, or they're in their workplace and they sit down and open up the software to help them out with their job, suddenly they become overwhelmed because they don't know exactly what was the right tool to be able to do what they need to do to be able to complete their homework or be able to participate in class or be able to complete that work assignment. So it's really important that we focus in on the specific tools within these programs. And to do that, what I've done is I've broken up the 400 different programs out there. I've broken them up into 6 main domains of tools that we can see. We can have tools to help out with oral language. We have tools to help out with reading, writing, note-taking, organization, and math. Now, these assistive technology tools I'm presenting here are really for more cognitive challenges. There are other assistive technologies to help out with sensory, to help out with motor, but this is really, this presentation is really kind of looking at more of the cognitive challenges. And these 6 areas are kind of the prominent cognitive challenges that I often see through the clinic. So once we kind of gather the information about the student, the task, the environment, now we need to start to look at this tool. And to do that, what you'll see on the website at learningdifferent.org through the Assistive Technology Selection Protocol is that there's 3 steps to find that right tool. The first one is a flow chart to help make the decision around the tool. The second one is the AT tool list that kind of describes to you what that tool is. And the third step is then actually finding programs, assistive technology programs on the market that have that tool built into it. So for example, let's take reading. If the student was having difficulties with reading, I might want to use a program such as to help out with decoding. Well, a decoding program out there on the market is called text-to-speech. So I could go from my selection protocol and look up what is text-to-speech in the AT tool list. And I'd find that text-to-speech is any technology or any program that converts text on a computer screen into audible speech. I can then go and look at my assistive technology program list to find a program that has text-to-speech in it. And one program that's a wonderful text-to-speech program on the market is a program called the Natural Reader. And it is a free text-to-speech program that anybody could download off the internet. And the Natural Reader takes any text on the computer screen and turns it into audible speech. So here's an example.
Have an additional function to convert any written text. Welcome to Natural Reader text-to-speech software. Natural Reader is a professional text-to-speech program that converts any written text into spoken words.
And it simply reads out loud to the student. Now, like any text-to-speech program, there are some variables that we need to always think about. We have to think about speed, because that's the first thing I find most students do. They sit down at the computer and they go, oh, there's a speed dial here. Let me set the speed up. And then they hit the play button.
In other words, it allows you to limit text to get on the screen. Natural Reader papers have an additional function to convert any written text into an only file.
And what used to take that student maybe 6 days to read, the computer reads to them in like 20 minutes, and then they go, boom, I am cured, thank you, I'm going out to play. But they come back to do, or the next day their teacher asks them a question about what they were supposed to read the night before, and suddenly realize they don't have a clue what the computer has just read to them, because it read to them at warp speed. And what I find with a lot of students who have cognitive challenges, one of the area of prominent impairment, especially for individuals who have gone through full brain radiation, is that processing speed. The speed at which we're able to move information around in our brains is an area of challenge. And so therefore, their brains are actually processing information at a slower rate. So when we're using the software, we actually have to slow it down. We actually have to slow it down to the point that it actually sounds slower to a typical individual than to that to that student. And so often we have to slow it down to about 120 words a minute, or kind of a -2 to -1 setting on some of the software. Because at that slower rate, then their brains are able to re-engage with the information that's being presented to them. So speed is a really critical issue. Another critical issue is voice. Finding the right voices out there is really important to help students. And one thing that we need to do is find natural voices. Nextup.com is a fantastic website to go and listen to a whole variety of, nextup.com, there we go, is a wonderful website to be able to go and listen to a lot of the state-of-the-art voices that we have out there. The AT&T voices are some of the best that we have. And here's AT&T Crystal, which is, through my research, has been identified as one of the best high-quality text-to-speech voices on the market.
With both male and female voices, the professional 16 kilohertz version of natural voices using text-to-loud MP3 creates the most realistic sounding computer voices ever.
And what you can hear from that voice versus a moderate voice, which is the one that comes built into the free natural reader, is that it has more prosodic cues. The tone of her voice and the intonation more resembles that of natural speakers. And so what we know through the research is when a voice is more natural sounding, it actually reduces the cognitive load on recognizing that voice. One of the default voices in many of our schools these days is called Microsoft Mary. Microsoft Mary was a text-to-speech voice that was developed back in 1998. And when a student who has processing speed challenges listens to Microsoft Mary versus a natural sounding voice, a natural text-to-speech voice, it actually takes them 3 times longer to respond to simple questions such as, do cats swim, or can a cat fly, yes or no, or true or false. It takes them 3 times longer to respond to listening to Microsoft Mary, a low-quality text-to-speech voice, versus one that sounds more human. So the gold standard always is when we're presenting audio or written material in an audio format is always to have as human-sounding a voice as possible. If you have audio books, that's the best standard because it actually has a human reading out loud to the student or the individual. But the next best is to get one of those high-quality voices. And on nextup.com, we can find those high-quality voices or listen to some of those high-quality voices such as the AT&T and the Acapellas. Now, just going back to the natural reader, another feature that comes in a lot of these text-to-speech softwares now is not only can they read out of their window, but they also can go into, what we can do is a floating toolbar. So now it's this floating toolbar. And as a floating toolbar, what I can do is I can highlight information on the computer screen and have it read it back to me.
As Canada's commercial capital, it is home to the Toronto Stock Exchange and the 5 largest banks in the nation.
So now I can basically select any text on my computer screen and it's able to read that text out loud. So I can select my emails and have them read out loud. I can select web pages, have them read out loud. If I had bought a book through Kindle, I could have it read out loud to me. So any text on my computer screen suddenly becomes accessible to me if I have a difficulty with reading individual words. And that is a fantastic way to empower students to be able to start to read the same type of work that their peers might be reading. One of the biggest things when Harry Potter came out is everybody wanted to read Harry Potter, but for many of the students that we worked with, especially if they had treatment early on in life, then their reading was impaired and therefore they weren't able to engage in the same reading, be able to read those same works that their peers were able to read, and therefore this software becomes wonderful. Another group of individuals I often work with are adults who also have a great difficulty being able to work through forms that are given to them. And again, by being able to allow them to scan a form onto the computer and then having the computer read that form out loud to them, suddenly they have access to that information and that they are able to begin to engage in that, filling out that form more independently and not need to rely on others as much. So text-to-speech is a fantastic technology. And in fact, what we see in terms of assistive technology in general over the last 3 years, and I'm just going to use text-to-speech as a model for this, is that the technology is becoming more and more portable. So 3 years ago, we were very reliant on desktops or laptops to be able to allow our computers to scan the work into the laptop and to be able to have it read back. Then in the last kind of 2 years now, we've been able to use smartphones and tablets much more readily to be able to do the same things our desktops can do. So on my iPhone, which I'm holding up here and no one can see, on my iPhone I have a program called Prismo, P-R-I-Z-M-O. And what Prismo allows me to do is I can take a picture of any text in front of me, and my phone will convert that picture, will pull it up on my phone, convert it into text, and then will read that text out loud. So a couple of years ago when I was trying this technology out, my wife and I, we were going through through Europe. And one night we found that ourselves in Spain, we got off a train at 11 o'clock at night in Spain, and one of the workers at this train station took our bags and put it behind a counter. Now, he handed us this form, and this form was in Spanish. Now, my wife and I, we didn't speak Spanish, and the worker, he didn't speak English, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and there was no one else around to help us. And by his nonverbal cues, we knew that he was pretty adamant that he was not going to give us our baggage until this form was filled out. So I was able to take my smartphone. I took a picture of that using Prismo. I pulled up that Spanish form onto my phone. It recognized the text on that form, and then I asked my phone to translate it from Spanish into English. I could then have my phone read it out loud, and in fact, once I heard what the questions were, I then answered those questions. I typed the answer to those questions into my phone. I then asked my phone to convert it from English back into Spanish, and then I had my phone read out loud to the operator what the answers were, and then he gave us the technology, my phone, or gave us our bags. So the technology is becoming more and more sophisticated, and the power of what we used to have on our laptops, we now can carry in our pocket. The other great place that we're going to is cloud-based computing. For example, on the internet, I can use, if I'm using Chrome, which is a browser such as Explorer or Safari, I can add in apps to it. And one of the apps I can add into it is a text-to-speech app. So I can highlight important information on a website and ask the computer to read that.
According to the 2011 census.
So now, no matter what computer I go to, as long as it has a Chrome browser built into it and it's connected to the internet, I can log into my Google account, and automatically any text that is in Chrome I have access to. But it gets even better. Let's say I wanted to make some notes. I want to record some information. I can use something called Browse or Web Notes, which is an annotative web. Oh shoot! Let me just. Let me sign in here to my web notes. Ah, shoot. Sorry. Anyhow, what I can do is I can actually highlight important text on a website, and it will actually capture that note and make point-form notes for me. Another great thing about using the web is there's something called scalable English that's starting to become more and more mainstream in a lot of web pages. And Wiki has this built right into it. Scalable English is when I present some text on, I can have a regular article, such as what about Toronto. But let's say the vocabulary is too difficult, or the sentence structure is too difficult for me to understand. What I can do is scroll down on the left-hand side, which brings up all my different language options, and I can look for the one called Simple English. And what it's going to do is render the same core information about that topic in about a grade 4 vocabulary level with a more simplistic sentence structure. So suddenly, again, as an individual, I can access the same information that my able peers are able to access, get that core information, but it's being delivered to me in a way that meets my cognitive abilities. So wikis are fantastic for having the scalable English built right into it. So cloud-based is great. Not only can I have the computer read to me, I can also have scalable English, and I can also have note-taking features right in on my web browser. But again, the technology is getting better and better. In fact, what we're doing right now with Google Glass, if anybody of you haven't heard of Google Glass at this point, Google Glass is this kind of a glass that you wear. It has a screen in the front. It has a camera, has a mic, and has a built-in speaker system. And so what I can do is I can stare. We're developing an app so an individual can look at, let's say, a sign or look at a menu and say read, and it will take a picture of that menu and it will actually read out loud to that individual what they're staring at. So suddenly, now, just by having this device on, an individual has access to all of written text that's in front of them. So the technology keeps getting better and better and better. I'm just going to skip vocabulary. The best thing for vocabulary, if a person doesn't know what a word is just to do an image search within Google. That seems to be our key one. Another big one that I see a lot of my adolescents and adult clients having difficulties with is in what we kind of day-to-day management, organizing myself, knowing where I need to be, when I need to be, and what I need to be paying attention to. So general day-to-day organization is really difficult. Often we tell individuals to get day timers and write things down, but really a day timer is just one more thing for them to be able to forget. One of my new favorite apps that you can get for your smartphones is what's called location-based reminders. And what this does is basically it sets up, using the GPS on your phone, you can set up a zone of where you either want, when you get close to that area, your phone will remind you about something, or when you leave that area, it will remind you. So for example, for students, I often set up a zone around their school. So as they're leaving school, their phone will beep at them and say, hey, did you remember to check your locker to get your math textbook and your permission forms out of your locker? Or as they're leaving home, it says, hey, did you remember to be able to get your homework? For adults, if they might be walking down the street, it might go off and say, hey, remember to buy some milk for you as you get close to the grocery store. So location-based reminders are a fantastic way to be able to pull up reminders based on where you are in geography. The other thing we can do is use other types of reminders, such as putting reminders into calendars, such as Google Calendars or iCalendars. So a parent, a teacher, or care provider can actually put in important events for that individual into a calendar, which then synchronizes to their phone. When it synchronizes to their phone, as that important date or time comes up, it reminds them that this is something that they have to do. So often I talk about our smartphones as really becoming kind of the mummy in my pocket, because it acts kind of like a mummy, constantly nagging or reminding an individual of what they need to be paying attention to. So calendar sharing is another fantastic thing that we have out there. And again, we can do this all very automatically. And in fact, a student can do this even without being able to know how to spell by using a lot of the features built right into our phones. So I'm just going to see if I can toggle over to my phone here for a second. So this is my smartphone here right now. So let's say I need to remember to pick up some milk on the way home. I can simply click onto the mic feature here. Pick up milk on the way home. It's going to put that, and then I can go to reminders and I can hit a location, Loblaws. Oh, sorry. It's having a hard time pulling up right this second because I'm doing it live. Hang on. It should have just easily pulled up the reminder for me. Sorry about that. But suddenly what we have the ability to do is we can be able to quickly have a person with a little bit of practice be able to put the information in. And again, that example goes to show it does take training. We can't just expect individuals to naturally be able to do this by just talking about it. It does take training to help individuals develop the habits of how to use these devices. They need practice, and it takes time for them to learn how to use them and integrate them together. And we also have lots of other note-taking devices out there. One of the fun ones, another way to take notes is if the person has poor typing abilities, they can actually still use a pen. Using LiveScribe, what a person can do is take notes down on a paper, but what it also does is record audio information. So if a person goes to, let's say, a doctor's appointment, they could basically take some very basic notes down, but as the doctor's talking and they're taking those basic notes down, it's recording everything the doctor's saying. That pen then can link up to their computer, and then when they sit down that night on their computer, they can click onto that note. They will see their own handwriting, but more importantly, when they click onto their handwriting, it will actually play back for them what the doctor was saying. So suddenly they have this ability to integrate both the ability to take notes by handwriting as well as by the audio recording. And we can also do that with other devices, such as EVERNOTE or Microsoft ONENOTE, which are, again, apps that we can download onto our smartphones that basically have built-in voice recording or even picture recording abilities in them. Another thing that I often have clients do is take pictures of signs, or take pictures of prescriptions, or take pictures of directions, and have that information loaded right into their phone. They can download, take that picture, integrate it into their EVERNOTE to organize those notes. And so when they go to the pharmacy, instead of having to remember the prescription, they can actually pull it up on their phone to be able to show it in case they lose those important bits of papers. So the combination of taking pictures and integrating it into note-taking apps such as EVERNOTE really allow us now, again, to have a very powerful way of pulling together really important information. Another big area that a lot of my clients have difficulties with are in the area of math, just being able to do basic math. And probably one of the best tools out there is the calculator still. However, we don't want to just get a regular calculator. The type of calculator we want to get them is a calculator that has what's called textbook display on it. It actually allows the individual to see, enter in the information, and actually allows them to see what they've entered into it. Often what I find when individuals use calculators is they enter a number, hit the plus sign, enter in the next number, hit the plus sign, and then hit the equal sign, and suddenly a magical number appears on the calculator. And they don't have a clue if that number is right or not, because they can't go back and check if they've actually entered in the information properly. And often, a lot of the difficulties that students run into, again, comes around attention and processing speed, and therefore they don't properly transpose the information from the textbook into the calculator. And so therefore, by having a textbook display, they can actually see everything they've entered into there, so they can check to ensure that they've entered the information properly. So the textbook display is a very powerful one in the area of math. And the last one I just want to kind of talk about quickly is what we call word prediction software. Word prediction software, so I'm just going to jump these ones here. Spell check, one of the limitations of spell checks is it brings up the same word a whole bunch of times when they hit it. What word prediction does is it actually guesses at what the student is trying to write. So for example here, as I'm trying to type in a word into the computer actually tries to guess at what word I'm typing in. So it guesses at the word that I'm typing in. And then as I scroll over that word, it will actually read that word out loud. So programs such as WordQ are fantastic text-to-speech programs because now whenever I sit down to type something, I can ensure that I'm getting the right spelling. And in fact, the software actually learns the spelling patterns of the student. A lot more sophisticated than those the word prediction or the autofills on our iPhones and Android devices. Programs such as WordQ actually learn how students are typing, and therefore it creates the ability to allow them to spell in their own spelling pattern, and it gets them the right word. And because of that, and it reads that word out loud, and because of that, I find that students are more likely, or individuals are more likely to use social media or even to do emailing, where before they were reluctant to do that because spelling was such an area of weakness for them. In fact, word prediction is getting so good, it's so well developed these days that teaching individuals how to spell correctly is not as much as a focus as teaching them to be able to get close enough to a correct spelling. As long as they have the right sounds in that word, the right phonemes, then the software is going to be able to fill in the rest. So word prediction is a fantastic device that we can get. And we now have word prediction, really good word predictions on our tablets, such as iWordQ. It's a fantastic app on our tablets, our iPads that we can have that allow students to be able to have the power of word prediction right on the go. So I guess I just want to conclude this. One of the big things that we need to do in being able to help students around the area of cognitive challenges is really that we need to help them to understand what their strengths are, to help them understand what they're good at, and then help them also understand where those areas of challenges are. And when we help them to understand what their learning challenges are and help them to kind of get the right combination of kind of these compensatory tools, such as these assistive technology tools, then these individuals are more able to become independent. I had an adult that I worked with several years ago who had a head injury early on. And due to his head injury that he had it at about grade 8, due to the head injury, he was unable to learn how to read and spell proficiently. And his whole life, he went through life feeling very discouraged about the fact that he was unable to read and write. He was able to get some, he worked in a printing press doing labor work, but his self-esteem was really impacted. At the age of 64, I sat down with him because he was referred to me because of difficulties with filling out forms. I sat down and I taught him how to use text-to-speech and word prediction. And after teaching him how to use that word prediction program, that one word they type in and guesses at what he's trying to spell, I let him sit there for 30 minutes. It took me about 5 minutes to teach him how to do it, and I let him sit there for about 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, I came back and he had written a paragraph, and it was a love note to his girlfriend. And there was this tears streaming down his face. And he said, "This is the first thing I have ever written in my life." And it was so moving because at this moment he realized that he was able to do something. He was able to overcome a barrier that otherwise had always haunted him, the ability to read and write. And after another kind of a month of working with him, I let him go and he started to do a lot of it. He came back a couple years later and said, "Hey, look at what I'm doing." He was scanning in all of anything he had, he scanned it, had it read it back, and he was writing on the computer and he goes, I've got the reading and writing stuff down, but I've been reading the website a lot, and I've learned that there's this thing called Bluetooth out there, and with Bluetooth technology, I can link my phone. And suddenly what I had was an individual who felt enabled to be able to go out and do stuff, interact in the world, and be more independent, to do work independent. And that's the goal around the technology. It is really to allow individuals to have more of that independence where otherwise they would not have. So thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Cunningham. What a great presentation. It's really amazing to see and to hear all these wonderful resources that are available to people. And I'll give everybody a moment to type their questions in the chat questions section for Dr. Cunningham. It looks like we have one question. Who would you recommend advocate for AT other than parents? Is there someone from treatment or hospital that would be available to meet with special education resource teachers?
Personally, I think that's an area in terms of the psychology departments at the hospitals can really kind of help fulfill that, or even in terms of social works. We do need people to help go in and educate the educational professionals about the unique learning challenges that our patients are experiencing. Often, because of the delays in academic difficulties that emerge out of a lot of our treatments, there's a disconnect. School boards are very good at dealing with ADHD and learning disabilities where they can see that early on how that develops, but when that learning changes, when that learning trajectory changes due to a medical condition, then it's really important to have psychology, social workers, or maybe nurses, anyone from the medical team to really go in and help educate the educators about the unique learning needs that their patients are experiencing, and therefore help advocate for the access to these types of resources. Because at this moment, the individual, that patient might not meet the criteria to get these resources, but we know if we get them now, they will benefit them in the future when those learning needs do really emerge.
Great, thank you. That is just the only question that's come through right now, so I'm going to give everybody a moment. If you would like to ask Dr. Cunningham a question, I'm going to show you some slides here as we are closing up. Give me 1 second here. Perfect. So just a reminder that we're coming into our busier fall season again, with October being Brain Tumor Awareness Month. We have some conferences that are going to be happening in the fall. We have our Vancouver Half Day happening on Saturday, September 20th. We have our full-day conferences in London, Calgary, as well as Halifax. We also have some healthcare, specifically some healthcare professional programs that will be happening. New in London, Ontario, we're going to be having a breakfast symposium. It'll be a half-day event, a free half-day event for healthcare professionals in the area. And then we'll also have our annual Calgary Healthcare Professionals Workshop, which will be the day before the Calgary Information Day Conference. And our annual Healthcare Professional Workshop that we normally do in Halifax is actually going to be combined with the Halifax Information Day Conference on Saturday, November 1st, something new that we're trying this year to try to save some money in our budget. And there will be specifically 2 sessions available exclusively for the healthcare professionals in the afternoon. So all the details on these healthcare programs will be available on our website by August 1st, and so stay tuned for that. And lastly, our next webinar is with Corinne Chalifour. She's the Program Director from Young Adult Cancer Canada, and her topic will be Young Adults with Cancer. If you have any questions about any of those programs, please feel free to email me anytime. And it does look like we have a couple more questions that have popped up here, Dr. Cunningham.
Great.
And comments. This person said, what a fantastic presentation. I can see how this technology can be used across many different disorders where cognition is a challenge. Are these solutions you talked about cost prohibitive for adults who could benefit from this technology?
No. So one thing that one of my goals is with the launch of the new website is really to help find those cost effective ideas. Often what happens, especially at the school level, is that they are looking at the very expensive stuff, like Kurzweil's 3000, which is $1,400. But if you download the free Natural Reader, that's free. You spend $25 to buy a voice, and now you have something that is comparable to a $1,400 program. Or another thing is looking at a lot of the smartphone apps that are available. You know, for kind of $9 or $10, you're able to turn your smartphone into a very powerful tool. So what we're finding is, yes, 5 years ago the technology was very costly. However, over the last 5 years, that cost is coming down drastically as a lot of this technology is just becoming more mainstream. It's being built into more and more of our devices, built into more and more of our software. It's just needing to know how to find it in those different programs, and that's really what the kind of the AT selection protocol is really going to help us do, is look at where are those tools hidden in the different free programs on the market.
Great, thank you. And just 2 more. One was just a comment. She said, no questions, great presentation, thank you. And another comment, SAVT, the SAVT program role can also do what Todd was describing regarding educating educators and advocacy. So the acronym for SAVT, I'm drawing a blank right now. Do you know the full acronym, Todd, for SAVT?
No, but I know if you go to Google Pogo and how you think you spell SAVT, you're going to pull it up.
Right. So also just one last comment. I just wanted to thank you very much for providing this resource. I will be suggesting that some of my clients watch the video. It is nice for them to see that there are other resources when I am no longer working with them. So great. So thank you so much, everybody. Looks like that's the last of the questions and the comments that have come through. And thank you again, Dr. Cunningham, for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. This was our 7th of 12 webinars this year. We're doing one every month. And as I said, the next one will be mid-August. And once again, just a big, big thank you for all the great information and your knowledge around this topic.
You're very welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
for having me.
Thank you.